Good evening, everyone. We'll begin tonight's forum. Thanks for coming to our joint forum with the Community Media Center and the Carroll County Times. I want to welcome you and thanks for your participation in tonight's event. So it's an opportunity to learn about District 5 candidates for Commissioner. My job is the Executive Director at the Community Media Center. So it certainly was an honor, and we wanted to make sure that we had an opportunity to get the word out about all of the different electoral races that are going on. So we hope that you'll take advantage of that information that we're sharing. And in that effort tonight, we're here, and I want to introduce our first host, who will be welcoming our candidates. He is the Honorable Charles Harrison. He's formerly a judge of the Orphans Court in Carroll County and former FBI, distinguished career at the FBI, and currently serves as the chair of the Board of Directors for the Community Media Center. So please join me in welcoming Charles Harrison.
Wow, good evening to everyone. It's such a pleasure to see so much community interest in the political process, that we could establish a dialogue, that we could exchange ideas and information about the candidates. But again, welcome to this particular forum. Tonight's forum is being held at the South Carroll Community Senior Center. This program will be recorded and rebroadcast on channels 19 and channel 23. And also will be available on demand at the Media Center website, carrollmediacenter.org. CMC is again partnering with our co-worker and co-sponsor, the Carroll County Times. We do this as a public service to the community. The program will provide that political advocacy that is necessary to allow you, the public, to get some idea of who the candidates are, what their platforms are, and in fact, what they actually stand for. We encourage citizens to learn about the candidates and to take an active part in the political process. I will now turn this program over to our partner, Mr. Wayne Carter, editor of the Carroll County Times. Wayne.
All right, thank you, Charles. All right, as the moderator for this evening, I'm going to first introduce each one of the candidates. At that point, each of the candidates will have 2 minutes for an opening statement. Following the forum introductions, I'll then ask the first question. Each candidate will then have 2 minutes to answer the question. All the candidates will answer an identical question. Just to be clear, this isn't a debate, this is an informational forum. At the conclusion of the question period and before the ending of the forum this evening, each candidate will again have 2 minutes to make a summary statement. All the responses will be timed, and the timekeeper will give the candidates a signal when 30 seconds remains. The timekeeper will ring a bell 2 or 3 seconds after the final stop signal is given, and the moderator may immediately interrupt the candidate and discontinue the statement or answer at that time. The questions that we'll be asking tonight have been selected from those submitted in advance to the Carroll County Times and the Community Media Center, as well as those from tonight's live audience. Tonight's forum is being recorded, so we ask that, again, everyone turn off their cell phones and that attendees refrain from applause or making noise during the forum or doing anything visible or audible to express support or opposition to any candidate during the forum. With that said, let us begin. Each candidate will now get their opportunity to present their 2-minute opening statement, and we'll start with Ms. Kathy Fuller.
Thank you. Good evening. Thank you for coming out tonight and for caring enough about the community to be here. We appreciate that. I understand the proper role of government, and as a commissioner, I'm going to be mindful of what government does versus what it's supposed to do. My signs say straight talk, and people who know me know that that's true. Tonight, I hope that you'll find that there's a clear difference between myself and the other candidates on this stage. It has nothing to do with gender, but it has everything to do with attitude. My attitude is that your money, your rights, and your community are yours. They don't belong to the government, they don't belong to the planners, and they don't belong to the bureaucracy. They belong to you. Watching the majority of the Board of Commissioners and the Planning Committee, I don't think that they see things the same way. I do. If you're a resident of District 5, you have a right to be concerned about this part of the county. All the forces are aligned and are pushing this area towards Owings Mills, away from the rural feel that we all moved here to enjoy. If you don't elect commissioners who vow to restrain government, cut spending in serious ways, and think outside the box when coming up with solutions, then you will be living in Owings Mills West sooner than you think. When candidates say they'll increase funding or programs, ask yourself, what's the need? How are they going to pay for it? And what will the impact be? Cutting spending is the only long-term solution to our financial problems. To paraphrase President Reagan, we don't have a revenue problem, we have a spending problem. I won't raise taxes because we pay some of the highest tax rates in the state. More growth in this area? Well, that'll only lead to more congestion, crowded schools, higher crime rates, more costs. If you agree that we need a commissioner who's going to protect our community and your wallet, I'd appreciate your vote.
Thank you. All right, next up is Mr. Dave Greenwalt.
Thank you. Commissioner Rothschild, friends, thanks for giving up the Orioles game tonight and being here. They certainly might not be as exciting as this will be. Anyway, I first moved into Eldersburg in January of 1969. At that point, we didn't have a traffic light on Route 26 Liberty Road all through the Carroll County corridor of it. Since then, of course, we can't turn back the clock, obviously, but the growth has kind of been unmanageable, at least for a number of years. And if you had the money, you had a business. We need to bring our traffic situation corrected. It's now close to 30 minutes getting through Eldersburg alone, 26 and 32. It's just a nightmare with traffic, especially obviously during the rush hour. The thing I see when I go after is the traffic situation in Eldersburg, and also being a supporter and an active advocate of our youth, having served as a coach in the Carroll County Boys Basketball League, a manager in the Freedom Area Softball League, umpire, etc. I've been involved with the youth since basically I moved into the area. And now we have a terrible threat in our community with the opioid crisis and heroin as well. I don't want to see another mother discover her son, daughter on a sofa dead. I don't want to give up on this youth. We need to correct the situation, and we can do so by working together with various other counties that are supplying this area. I appreciate you again, the time. Thank you.
Thank you. Next up is Mr. Frank Robert.
Thank you, Wayne, Sherry, Richard, and Charles, and all the folks at the Community Media Center. Thank you for tonight and the town meetings that you've done and will do in the future. Thank you to Dave, Ed, and Kathy. Without this competition, I would not have this opportunity to connect with the voters of our great community. I'm Frank Robert, and with your help, I look forward to being your next District 5 Commissioner. Please visit my web and Facebook page, votefrankrobert.com. If you're interested in meeting me and learning more, come over to our campaign party this Saturday afternoon at the American Legion. We'll have live music, barbecue, and a drive-in car show. We have a terrific grassroots campaign to fulfill my vision. We made Sykesville the coolest small town in America. Now let's make Carroll County the best place to raise a family. I'm a former teacher, coach, college administrator, medical sales rep, and currently the Associate Director of the Mid-Atlantic United Methodist Foundation, helping churches in a 5-state area. I have a BA and Master's of Education from William & Mary and an MBA from Loyola. I'm married to a teacher, and I have 2 daughters, one a nurse and the other a future teacher. In 2007, successfully launched Upward Sykesville to gain council seats and move Sykesville on a positive upward track. When small towns were dying, we took on the challenge to make Sykesville successful. Elected for 2 terms, including 6 years as a Sykesville Town Council president, I'm the only candidate that has this small town turnaround experience. We accomplished a lot. reestablishing the Sykesville Parks and Rec Committee, creating a Main Street Association, hiring the first Main Street manager, and originating the Sykesville Annual Holiday Decorating Contest, establishing the Sykesville Military Memorial. I want to thank you for the opportunity. I look forward to the debate.
Thank you. And finally, Mr. Ed Rothstein.
Thanks, and try to do this without the glasses. First and foremost, thank you for the opportunity of being here this evening. I'd like to first focus on a few pronouns up front. This ain't about me or I, it's about you, it's about we and us. The form, about moving, I apologize, I am gonna have to read. This is about to make things happen and execute growth in our community. This formula proved successful for 30-plus years while I was wearing a uniform. It culminated as the garrison commander on Fort Meade, where we worked together, overseeing an over $330 million budget, resourcing the priorities in the community that focus on 7 public schools, a fire department, a police department, security, and economic growth. And upon retirement, I was an economic developer where I used the same formula. Finally, as a service-disabled veteran, I started a small business that focuses on small businesses in the community. In my view, this community is awesome. We moved here a little over about 11 years ago, and we moved here because the community, the schools, and really the quality of life is second to none. And that was actually amplified when I went off to Afghanistan for a year, and this community wrapped their arms around Audrey, Emily, and Sam, and for that I'm eternally grateful. I am blessed to be supported by family, friends, and colleagues that have included many mentors along the way. With that said, I'm very comfortable in saying that I pledge to listen, learn, and then lead, leading with you into the future and not mimicking or repeating the past, focusing on keeping and increasing quality of life while moving forward. This election is about service and experience, confidence and character, focusing on the issues that matter most to you, that will lead our community in Carroll County forward into a much more prosperous place, and therefore I ask for your consideration to vote for me on June 26th. Thanks.
All right, thank you. All right, so we'll get started with our first question, and we'll start again at the end of the row with Ms. Kathy Fuller. This question submitted from our audience, and I think probably the simplest way to ask this: what are your views on the Freedom Master Plan?
Well, the Freedom Master Plan has a lot of problems. I attended many of the recent meetings that we've had on the Freedom Master Plan. I spoke out in opposition to it. The Freedom Master Plan is really trying to re-engineer this part of Carroll County. People have zoning rights or property rights, and it comes with particular zoning. And this plan has come in and changed the zoning, and it's negatively impacting a lot of the neighborhoods. The government is doing this in order to raise revenues. I think that that's a misuse of zoning. It happens to be what zoning is being used for these days, but when it negatively impacts the community, that's a problem. Because we need more revenue, they're doing this, but if we would cut back on our spending, that kind of negative impact wouldn't be necessary. So I am not a fan of the Freedom Master Plan, and I hope that they push it off until we're elected and we can do a better job.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Greenwalt.
I would agree with Kathy that we need to push it off, and we're so close to this new election, and see what a new commission board would look at as to the zoning area. But our focus seems to be right now, and it's good to look to the future, but our vision needs to happen right now, what we need now. And what we need now is more recreational fields for our youth. We need to correct the traffic in Eldersburg. As I said, we've got to look at side roads. We've got to look at service roads. We have such from Oklahoma Road to west to East Hemlock Drive, and we need to look at more opportunities that way. We also, if elected, I will go to the State Highway Administration and look to either expand our bridges over the Liberty Reservoir or build new ones. we need to, like I said, relieve the traffic congestion. It's near a half an hour now to get from Oakland Mills Road through the Eldersburg area, and it's just going to get worse. We've got new construction coming in not far from here, more homes. It's going to create a worse congested area than we have, and it's time we start looking at it now, not 20 years from now.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Robin.
Good. Yes, I am pro-growth. I'm for growth. I'm pro-business. We want responsible growth in our area. I don't think, as we can see with the certain situation with the way the Board of Commissioners has dealt with the closing of North Carroll High School, you can see that there's some issues going on there. There's not a very good consensus around the table on some of the plans. So I think the realization that we need growth, when you have the responsible growth, you'll see that it's done the right way. It's impactful for our local businesses. It creates jobs, a lot of opportunity. If you're not growing, you're dying. And so I think with the advantage of Warfield and using Warfield correctly, I think that the Eldersburg area and Warfield together, planned right, can be very positive. The county commissioners working with the small towns so that they can grow the way they want to grow together can be very positive.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Rothstein.
Yeah, I'd like to amplify on a couple of things that were talked about, and let's kind of separate them. Let's look at the business and economic growth. And what's happening in Warfield, there are great opportunities. We got Nexian Health there, which is just a class act. We got a cybersecurity company there, and there's a lot more opportunities in those buildings to bring more corporate and businesses into Warfield. I am absolutely pro-growth in that respect, but pro-growth, as I was mentored recently, does not mean pro-population or population growth. They don't have to be one and the same. And that's the issue that we got to concern ourselves with, is with that population growth and the residential areas. If there's no demand, then why build more residential areas? If the infrastructure does not allow for this type of infrastructure or residential areas to be grown, then don't do it. There are a lot of good things that are happening with the Freedom Plan, but what I really would recommend to the Board of Commissioners is that they take a deep breath, they take a tactical pause, and they allow the board, the incoming board, to take this on. We've got a lot on the plate right now. We're moving forward in so many great directions, but we should not rush into something where we still don't have the community behind a plan like the Freedom Plan right now. So, thanks.
Okay, thank you. For the second question, we'll start with Mr. Greenwalt. And you had talked a little bit about alleviating traffic in Eldersburg. So the question for all the candidates, specifically, what would you do to alleviate traffic in Eldersburg along routes 26 and 32?
Okay, the bridges we have now over the Liberty Reservoir are structurally need to be looked at. The bridges are over 70 years old now, or approaching 70 years old. So I'd like to go to the State Highway Administration and see what we can do as far as either, like I say, either expanding them or creating a second bridges over each on the Liberty Road areas. The traffic signals, I know they're necessary evil, but we've got, like I said, 0 in 69. Now we have about 7 or 8, and that's just from Oakland Mills to White Rock Road. We have probably about 10, I guess, in that area, whatever. Anyway, the situation there is that we need to look at, do we really need some of them? Obviously, we need some of them, but also let's get more. It's so frustrating to be the only car sitting at a light at 8 or 9 o'clock at night, and the gas prices what they are, and they're going up, and you're just sitting there. So it's time that we really get the more modern lights, as far as knowing the smart lights, I guess, knowing that when they need to turn them off and when to let the traffic flow. Also, service roads on the each side of Liberty Road, I think we need to expand. And we also need to encourage the expansion of 32, bring it right up to Liberty Road if we need to. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Mr. Robert.
Good. Agree with a lot what Dave's saying there. I think obviously 32, the expansion already, there's money in play to expand 32 up from 70. We see it right now from 32 down into Howard County, and I know it's going to be coming up to Warfield. So I think that's going to be alleviate some of the issues. But it is crazy, especially at 4:30 to 5:30 every day. People coming up 32, it is becoming a parking lot. So I think it's a big issue. Timing of the lights also too is a big issue. So I think some better studies as far as the timing of the actual lights and using that will be very helpful for the folks. I like the idea of the feeder roads off of 26. Eventually, those will end up being 3 or 4 lanes, but at least initially, it's a good way to route the traffic. But once again, I think if you're looking at the plan for what's going on at Freedom and at Warfield, and I was at Warfield, the meeting of the town council Monday night, discussing Warfield, what was going on there, the plan of a new hotel there, looking at the feeder system and how it's going to work. I think Warfield, if it's developed properly, will be a nice growth area for the town. Eldersburg is great too. It should not be just opened up to developers, and go to it. I'm against high rises there. I think it's or anywhere in the county, and so I think we need with some controlled growth, responsible growth. We think we can do a very great job. Turn this around. All the growth in the county does not need to be in our area of the county, but can be in other areas. Working with the small towns. Every single small town wants to grow. They want more residents, but they want to do it in their way, and we need to work with them to get it done. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Rothstein.
Okay, so focusing on the question that you're asking about 32 and 26, congestion and infrastructure. A few years back, under our last administration, we kind of got messed up with Governor O'Malley. They took the money away from a large part of our infrastructure and focused it on metro and other transportation needs for cities. I believe with Governor Hogan, and I applaud our legislation and our delegates for working hard with the administration to getting some funding to building the infrastructure. It's hard to do. It's going to be slow moving, but we're definitely going in the right direction, and I think our delegation and our voice matters, and the administration, Governor Hogan's administration, is moving in that direction. The other thing that we can do right now, though, is look at our internal transportation, our CAT system. Let's talk to those that are running those buses, make sure that they're running the right buses at the right times, picking the right people up at the right locations. One thing I did not mention, I serve on the Veterans Advisory Council, and I'm so proud of the shuttle services for our veterans, and I still don't think it's being used enough. So continuing to communicate and get the community involved and be as transparent as we can to serve you on these type of systems, I think is the way to go. We're going to build the infrastructure on 26, and we need to, and on 32, absolutely on 32. But I do think we're going in the right direction. There's a lot we can do right now. So thank you.
All right, very good. Ms. Fuller.
So alleviating the 2632 congestion, I have always kind of wondered why we have 97, which is a very good, road that obviously was built to carry, traffic swiftly, why we are not diverting, since they're widening 32, probably eventually up to 26, dogleg as it happens in Westminster, dogleg over to 27 or 97 and send it up to Westminster. I think that would alleviate a lot of the traffic trouble that's coming down 32, and it's coming through very congested neighborhoods and people's front yards practically. So 97 is meant for that, and I'm not really sure why they decided to open up 32 rather than opening up 97 going out of the county instead, because that would have made more sense. One of the problems on 32 is the entrance and exit for the Martin's Shopping Center. You can only go in, but you can't come out, so it creates congestion on Johnsville Road. That that needs to be looked at again. That doesn't make any sense. There's a stoplight up the way on Bartholomew Road that doesn't have a correct turn light on it, and I think that's a very dangerous intersection. That should be looked at. Right now, the Freedom Plan is looking at putting a neighborhood or a road through to connect Bartholomew and send it right through a neighborhood on Monroe. That doesn't make sense, and hopefully, we can find alternatives. There's already roads going around neighborhoods. Why are we diverting them through neighborhoods? I do agree that the traffic lights need to be aligned. When I worked in the commissioner's office, I read documents where the state was actually advocating congestion in order to put people out of their cars and into mass transit. So we should be looking at what the state's done in the county.
Thank you. Okay. The next question will start with Mr. Robert. A lot of questions have come in sort of related to schools and retention of teachers. Obviously, the county budget is tight and what they're able to give the school system. What would your solution be if elected to try to get more money to the school system to help with teacher retention?
Excellent, great question. One of the biggest issues that we're running on right now, the three, three is schools, education, as far as the retention of teachers and resources. One of my previous jobs, I actually worked for William & Mary, recruited around at different high schools all around Virginia. There's a lot of great opportunities to adapt some of those issues, some of the unique setups some of the other high schools have done. There's a great high school in Winchester. It's got some really creative financing that are going on too. So there's some great things that we can do. I think if you've seen what we did in Sykesville, as far as getting the businesses back, Sykesville was dying in 2007 when we took over. And so in 2009, we started the rebirth of the town. I think you see the same thing. Once we get the rebirth going, you see a positive attitude going on. People are willing to take initially a little bit less money, resources, to work in a better situation where they can see the future. If the future is going to be this is the best place to raise a family, they're going to take a little bit less money to live here and work here and play here. And so I think if we can cast that vision and start working towards it, the resources will flow. The people, once you get out of college, once you start getting a family, the first thing you're looking for, if you start having children, is where's the first thing? It's schools. Where's the best schools? Is it safe? Is the second question. So I think if we can continue our work with the schools to get more resources, there's more money. It's all a matter of priority. I've got some creative ideas with my current job, helping churches with financing. We can do the same thing with the schools.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Rothstein.
We got to remember that the number one priority is our kids and the education of our kids. So focusing on that is obviously number one. I applaud the commissioners for working on the budget and getting additional funding for our schools for this upcoming fiscal year. I am challenged with the state on only providing $311,000 in this upcoming budget. In other words, it was flat from last year to this year. We have to continually work with the state and in getting a different funding mechanism or tools to be used. Right now, the tools that they're using at the state is a variable, algorithm that talks about population in the schools. And therefore, you're only going to get so much money. But it's not talking about the schools themselves. So when population decreases just by a little bit at a time in each school, we're still having the same amount of teachers and administrators, and they need to be funded. So I think what the state needs to focus on is both populations at the schools and then also the infrastructure. And I think by doing that, we would be getting a little bit more plus up from the state. I think we need to continue to have creative ideas, going after state and federal funding, grants, and different mechanisms that may be out there to focus on specific education pieces like STEM or cyber and cybersecurity, as that's being funded more and more out of the federal system. So I think we're going in the right direction. We have a long ways to go. I'm very proud of my kids that have gone through the school system here, and I think all our kids have gone through the school system here. And, we want to keep that going, but thank you.
Okay, Ms. Fuller.
Well, can you restate the question, please?
More or less, how would you handle getting additional revenue to the schools to work with teacher retention.
Teacher retention, okay. Well, what most people probably don't realize is that question is a little bit misleading. 3 years ago, we had the lowest teacher retention problem in the state. Today, we have among the lowest retention problem. You know, we have high retention. People like to work here, and that's a good thing. But I think that it's fair to pay teachers a reasonable wage, and everybody wants that. One of the things that I'm wondering why the commissioners don't do, they have the ability, since we're funding the school system at the 5th highest education effort in the state. So we are putting, for what we have in the county available, we are the 5th highest effort towards our school system. So we're putting quite a bit of money into the school system. But the teachers say that it's not reaching them. So the commissioners have the ability to fund by category. And one of those categories is wages and salaries. Why aren't the commissioners doing that? If the teachers feel that they are not getting that money, we can put that money directly in there and make sure that they do. We want to keep our high-quality schools. We have great parents. We have a great community. We have involved parents and community. And I think that we have great schools. We want to keep our teachers, and I'm sure that they want to stay here. And I think that that's, you know, since we're already putting quite a deal of money into the system, we need to target it better.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Greenwalt.
Nearly 20 years ago, as Vice President of the Freedom Area Rec Council, approached Dr. Brian Lockhart, then Superintendent of the late Brian Lockhart, then Superintendent of the Carroll County Public School System, about having our Sykesville Raiders play on the field of Liberty High School. I think the schools in our area shouldn't be off limits to the community. The principals protect those fields like it's theirs and not ours. I think we're in for a much better swing now that we're going to have another new superintendent of public schools, and I believe the favorite right now is the son of Dr. Brian Lockhart. I hope so. Anyway, as far as teacher salaries, a few years back, I just wanted to see what was going on, so I volunteered up as a substitute teacher. Not that I didn't get paid a few dollars, but anyway, I remember being substituting at South Carroll High, my alma mater, and they called me in for an afternoon to take a teacher's place. And that teacher was in charge of the study hall. Not that I hadn't visited the study hall maybe as a student, but it was a different experience as a teacher. And I asked some of the children that were there, I shouldn't say children, high school students, and this teacher, that was his job, study hall. So I think we need to look closer at what we're budgeting towards the education system. I don't see it being changed as far as the percentage of the budget, but we need to make sure that we spend dollars wisely. I'm going to run out of time on that one. Thank you. Sorry.
All right, thank you. All right, this next question will start with Mr. Rothstein, and sort of sticking to the idea of the county's overall budget. Do you believe that there are cuts that could be made to the county's overall budget? And if so, what would you cut? And if not, how would you raise revenue?
I'm absolutely not for raising any taxes, number one. And I think the focus should be on the second part of that, and that's raising revenue. We have a lot of opportunities to raise revenue, to bring in strong economy, especially down here in District 5 into our community. Warfield, once again, is a great example of how that can be achieved. I think the important part, and I've done it before, is working regionally with the other communities in other jurisdictions and partnering with them on opportunities to bring good corporate businesses into Carroll County. That will then allow for people that live in Carroll County to work in Carroll County, as opposed to be transient into other communities. As far as, so I answered the second part first. Answering the first question, where will we cut? Priorities change over time. One of the challenges we have right now, and we all know it, and that has to do with the drugs, and was briefly mentioned a little bit ago. We've got to focus more attention on how the heck we're going to handle these drugs. We can't afford to see more funerals in our community. Some of it's dealing with resources, money, but other resources is time and people, and getting our community working together. So I think we need to be much more collaborative, serving a focus on how to deal with issues like this that are going to be raised, and then really nail them, kind of cutting the head off the snake, because it's a frustrating issue that we just cannot be pushing off to the side. So we need to be creative. I do applaud Commissioner Wance yesterday for opening the door with ag preservation, which I completely 100% support, but he was able to find funds from that and shift it over to some of the needed issues that we have today. So thanks.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Fuller.
Well, I've noticed that there has been a growth in the county government just since I worked there. We do some things that we don't need to be doing. We have 3 people working in the IT in recording things. I don't think we need 3 people recording commissioners doing this and that. I would cut there. I think that there's other places like that we could cut. But I think it's more important that we look at increasing our revenues. And one way, as Republicans, which most of us probably are in this room, our mantra should be taxes, right? We saw what happened with Trump. He just mentioned a cut in taxes, and that raised revenue. So I wanted to give you a little bit of statistics. Out of 24 jurisdictions, we have the 4th highest income tax rate in the state, higher than Frederick, Baltimore County, and Anne Arundel County. We are the 8th highest real property tax rate, higher than Howard, Anne Arundel, and Montgomery County. And we are the 7th highest personal property tax rate, higher than Anne Arundel, Montgomery, and Frederick. To me, that's pretty astonishing. So I think, maybe we don't have the revenue here because our taxes are pretty high. Traditionally, Republicans cut taxes to raise revenue. I spoke with a gentleman that said, just a businessman yesterday, he took his business property and he moved it out of the state because he had a business partner that was working in Los Angeles, and their personal property tax rates were lower than Eldersburg's. We don't have a revenue, we're not getting the revenue maybe because people don't want to come here because we're taxing too high.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Greenwalt.
I applaud the 59th Commissioner Board that put up a supermajority for a tax raise. It's got to be approved by 4-1. I don't think you'll see a person here tonight on the board or anywhere else that is coming out and saying we need to raise taxes. That's just not going to be something that you'll hear, and nor from me. The revenue can be increased from the Warfield project if we move on it. I was on the committee, the original committee back in the mid-90s, and the decision then was whether Sykesville wanted it or the Carroll County wanted it. We went with Sykesville. But we need to move on it. It's time that we move. Rosewood was just destroyed down in Baltimore County. Our question here in the stall, it seems to be that we're worried about the asbestos, and maybe perhaps Mr. Angelo's ready to pounce on it. But if it came down in Baltimore County, I don't know why we can't do it in Carroll County and get moving on it. We need those businesses to be welcomed into the county and develop that Warfield project finally. And let's bring in not the businesses that will pay the minimum wage, but the businesses that will increase salary, say $75,000 to $100,000 in salaries. We need those. Anyway, the Warfield project, like I say, it should be on the table, and we should start moving on it now. I'll leave it at that.
Thank you. Mr. Robert.
Good. Yeah, my entire 8 years on the Sykesville Town Council never voted for a tax raise. So that's, I think, I agree. Everybody here is probably not going to be voting for tax raises. The other issue is looking at technology. How can we make Carroll County more attractive for people to move here? If you have a better situation, once again, schools are better, crime is low, and then you have technology. There's a lot of talk about technology. If we can have Warfield is hooked with, one of the nice things that the former commissioners did was the fiber optic. And so there is a great access to the internet there too, which is the future, as we all know, for a lot of the technology and a lot of the companies. I think we're seeing a good growth over there. We'll know another, I guess, in end of June how things are going, if they actually can start opening some of the buildings. We had to have 145 different townhouses there to be able to make the project work, to be able to pay for the old historic buildings. So having to, once again, to your increasing population, which is not a bad thing if it's in a responsible way. But I think we see with technology, several people on my inner circle, my kitchen cabinet, if you will, are technology people. And it would be very nice for the town and the county to get on the technology bandwagon. When we have more technology, better things happen. We get more effective, maybe even be able to pay our water bill online. So I think there's some great opportunities for making the county better, more efficient, and look forward to doing that as a county commissioner. Thank you.
Okay, very good. For this next question, we'll start back up with Ms. Fuller. Please tell us what you think of the new ethics ordinance that the commissioners passed recently. Is it stronger or weaker than the law it replaced?
The ethics ordinance has a lot of problems, and I've been quite outspoken on this ordinance. It has absolved the sitting commissioners of their conflicts of interest. It redefined who fell under conflicts of interest, so that if you are a business person and you're being funded by the county, that's a conflict. But if you have a job, or a family member has a job with another part of local government, that's not a problem. But everywhere else, that's a conflict of interest. So, if we allow conflicts of interest, that just allows us to increase our funding, because we have a self-interest to make that funding go up when I'm funding my own raises on the other end. That's a problem. That was what this ethics ordinance did. And it absolved throughout the government those kinds of conflicts of interest. So, yeah, I'm not in favor of it. I think we need to go back and we need to make some real changes.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Greenwalt.
I think the new ethics ordinance was kind of rushed through. Not kind of, it was. I mean, we threw it out there. Hardly anybody got to review it. I know Commissioner Rothschild was a staunch enemy of the new ethics order. And we also have, as an editor of a newspaper, have continually, initially at least when it was still a fight, editorialized against one of our sitting commissioners who's a teacher, and there was voted incredibly enough to me that it wasn't a conflict of interest when he is one of 5 that sits on making a budget for the year. Vote yourself a raise. It was such a conflict, such an obvious conflict, that I didn't even think it stood a chance. I mean, when I asked this individual prior to him taking office what he would do, he said he'd have to excuse himself for the budget, voting on the budget. How can you be a commissioner and not be voting on the budget? It's just an incredible thing. Anyway. So there, yes, the Ethics Commission should be re-examined as far, well, not the commission, but the ethics order. And I just find it, there's some flaws in it, and I'd like to see it get corrected. We have, right now, as commissioners, anybody in the county, actually, that's employed, can write their own ticket as far as going to Ocean City or whatever. There's no limit And what we should do is connect with the federal government and say, this is how many dollars we're going to spend as taxpayers to you for housing, for food, et cetera.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Robert.
Good. I think we're all for transparency. I work with churches all the time trying to teach them ethics. One of the biggest issues is we make sure that you're transparent and you disclose up front everything that might possibly be something that would come forward. And it's hiding the issues is the big problem. As we know in Watergate, that was a big problem. You know, it wasn't really the act was the problem, it was covering it up. So the same thing here too with transparency. If we start eliminating everything, then that means the county commissioners can't even vote on lowering their own taxes because that would be a benefit to them. So once again, transparency is crucial. I'm all for ethics. For the town of Sykesville, we were all for the ethics ordinances at the same time, too. The problem was that once it gets too onerous on the people that are filling out the forms that are not the paid political appointees, but it's the volunteers that have to work a lot of the committees. And if they're going through all the ethics, it can be very time-consuming and scare off a lot of the volunteers. So, but as far as paid politicians or anybody like us, I'm all for all the transparency. Declare it up front so everybody knows what you're talking about, and I'm all for it.
Thank you. Mr. Rothstein.
So I am actually for what's moving forward with the ethics ordinance. It's not a perfect solution, but you know, perfection is sometimes just the enemy of just good enough. And I'm not saying that we should just be good enough, but we should be in a trajectory in going into the right place. So the ethics ordinance at least puts forth an effort for us to hold ourselves accountable. As you know, I've been in the military a long time. There's a couple things that I did while I was in the military. One was raising the right hand with the oath to the Constitution, to defend the Constitution. The other was to abide by ethics. We're all grown-ups when we put our uniform on. I believe we're all grown-ups here, and we should be responsible that way. Transparency is very important, but we should also have the ability to recognize if it's not appropriate to be able to make that decision, to recuse yourself from making that decision and allow others to do it. We have checks and balances within our community. We should use them, and we should be proud of the way that we're moving forward. If we wait to get an ethics ordinance that's perfect, we're never going to get there. So for me, I think where we are right now is not where we want to be at the end of the day, but it's definitely in the right direction. So thank you.
Okay, thank you. All right, this next question will start with Mr. Greenwalt. And basically the question is, which form of government do you prefer? Commissioner, home rule, charter, and why?
Okay. I don't see this as being a rather big issue in this election. It's, I believe, more up to the voters and to see the constituency what they're in favor of. But I think with looking at government, the United States government, the federal government is probably more in line with what I'd agree with, where you have an executive branch and a legislative branch. Right now, the county is split into 5 districts, and there's a groundswell, I think, of people that don't like that, because they can't vote for everybody that's going to represent them. The 3 commissioners countywide is probably fair to everybody. But if you look at the 5 districts, they could be the legislative setup, and you could have an executive, as long as that executive doesn't have all the power and it's a checks and balance, it might be the way to go. But right now, this county's gone over 150 years, I believe, on this commission form of government, and so I don't see there's any big push to change it. It has come up a couple of times for home rule and has been voted down each time. I would think, though, that if we set up a committee to study it and to go to charter, I'd like Kathy Fuller to be on that committee. Thank you.
All right, Mr. Robert.
Good question. I think we've been very fortunate, and a lot of people, if you ask them who their local county commissioner is, number one, they don't know, or they know that they can vote for 2 or 3 people. People are very confused about the new situation. Most of the local people. I think we've been very lucky once again, too, that we've been able to get most of the issues that we want for Carroll County through the state legislature. But once again, I think we're highly at risk for having the rest of the state of Maryland deny us some of the things that we may want. So I'm all for referendums. I think right now, the way the setup is, it's very weak on being able to get referendums passed. I think we need some more abilities to get referendums through so that people can direct the county the way they want. And the question is, do we go 3? Do we go 5? Is it all open? I love the opportunity for everybody to vote on it so that we can create it the right way. People say, oh, yeah, we like you, we like Ed, and we'll vote for both of you. I said, well, good luck, because you can't do that. So I think we need to work from where we are. It's an old system. I think we've been very fortunate to not be denied some of the things that we really want to get done here in Carroll County. So I'm not sure if there's a hybrid that we need to look at, but I'm all for changing the way we're doing it to make it more efficient, more responsible, and more responsive to our local constituents. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Rothstein.
I'm running for commissioner to represent you here in District 5. So therefore, I believe in this form of government. We should not be moving to charter government right now. There are other governments and jurisdictions in the state that are unchartered government, and I applaud them if it works for them. But the bottom line is up to you whether you want to change from commissioner-based to charter government. And I support that in every way. I'm here to serve you. The key to success that I believe with this type of government that we have today is the ability to lead, to collaborate, and to want to serve and serve you. And it's working. So once again, why break something when it's working? And yeah, I am absolutely not for charter government in our community today. I applaud those that have it. It's up to you if you want it for next time or in future generations. So thank you.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Fuller.
Well, I am absolutely opposed to charter government. I have watched very closely what has happened with the last couple of counties that moved from commissioner to charter. And you look at Frederick, the cost of running their basic government, just from the time before they decided to move to charter to the first year of charter, their basic operating costs for their governments tripled. I mean, that's a huge leap in cost. We don't have enough money for that. Charter government takes what we have and it lays over the top of it another layer of bureaucracy. So we take everything that we already have with the 5 commissioners and we add to it a county executive on the top. We change the names and we put the county executive on the top. That adds immediately cost to your government. How can we afford that? Some people say that it makes it more efficient. Well, efficient government is not pro-taxpayer. Efficient government quickly raises taxes and it rolls over taxpayers. We have a form of government that is traditional to Maryland. Every county started with this. Charter government came in about the 40s, the same time as like the New Deal did. A lot of bad ideas, and charter government's one of them. One of the things you hear is local control. We need local control. When you hear local control, you should be thinking they want to raise their own salaries. Commissioners can't raise their own salaries. They have to go to the delegation to do that. But charter counties can, and they do. One of the first things that Frederick did with their council was they raised their salaries. So it's a swiftly upward moving tax lever, and I definitely don't support it. The last thing is that charter government, when you have an executive at the top, he makes most of the decisions and then the council kind of can object to it, but he doesn't have to have an open meeting. One person isn't an open meeting.
Thank you. Okay, for this next question, we'll start with Mr. Robert. This one was emailed into us before the forum. kind of goes back to some of the zoning issues related to the Freedom Comprehensive Plan. Do you agree or disagree with county planning officials soliciting landowners to officially request changes to their land use so the county can put increased housing densities and planned unit developments in long-established neighborhoods?
So, well, absolutely not. I think we're not in a situation where we want to increase density, especially in our area of the county. Now, if that's something that the other small towns would like to have, whatever, I'm all for that. But in our area, I think we're, so I would say no. Yeah, no for that. Thank you.
Okay.
Yeah, this actually may be a quick answer. The answer is absolutely no. If there's no demonstrated need, then why do it? If we don't have the infrastructure and we're trying to put a square peg in a round hole, then why do it? It goes back to getting the finalized Freedom Plan completed. There's things that I do applaud that are happening in our community with the Freedom Plan. But there's other things that I think what we need to do is take a tactical pause and therefore make the right decisions at the right time. And to me, making those decisions with the new board of commissioners when elected is the best thing to do. But again, just to change zoning to incentivize residents or any type of development is absolutely wrong. So thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Fuller.
No. Absolutely not. I don't think if it's the landowner's idea to come to the county, that's one thing. But for the county to reach out to the landowners and suggest that this would be a good idea, I think that's why we have the problems that we've had with the Freedom Plan, because some of that, I believe, happened. And so it sets up an expectation with the landowners that the county is, really ready for this, but maybe then the rest of the neighbors and things aren't. And then you have problems between parts of the community, and that's not good for anybody, so no.
Okay. Mr. Greenwalt.
In our area, we really need to control the growth. That doesn't mean a moratorium like the board came back in '06 with. That little idea of moratorium will cost us over $30 million when the developers sued and won because their projects had already been approved. We had a situation right here in Eldersburg where on the other side of now the Eldersburg Commons, or used to be Carroll Town Mall, where there was a Target that was a store that was trying to come in. And instead, there was the group that fought bitterly against it. We don't need another store. Maybe we didn't, whatever. But now we got a development there that's brought in a whole lot of people and we welcome them into the community. No fault of theirs, but it's added to the congestion and traffic and has strained us in our schools as well. So, no, I don't think we need another high-density area. The thing there is that when you look at it, definitely not high density, but you do need housing that a young couple can start their family into and be able to afford it instead of us sending them off to Pennsylvania.
Okay, very good. All right, this next question will start with Mr. Rothstein. Again, another reader-submitted question. Many of the residents in District 5 use public water and sewer. Rates have continuously increased over the years, and costs are becoming prohibitive. How do you propose to curb burdensome public water and sewage rates for District 5 users?
That's a tough one. And as we know, the commissioners just went through the budget, and it's going to be looking like it's going to get approved. And 6% increase in water and sewerage is ridiculous. And, we should be up in arms about that. Working with the different commissioners and representing District 5 and focusing on you and our community specific, knowing that we will take the burden of that is just wrong. So we got to work with them and again look at compromises. Unfortunately, I think it's a done deal for this last budget, and we really have a problem with it. It's unacceptable. As mentioned earlier, no one wants to raise taxes that appear, and probably you as well. And seeing that we raised this 6% is just ridiculous. So I think what we need to do is voice ourselves a little bit stronger and working harder with the other parts of the county to figure out what is the best solution. So that's all.
Thank you. Ms. Fuller.
Well, in the Eldersburg area, maybe people don't realize, but the water and sewer is under an enterprise fund, and that means that the user fees are supposed to support the cost of the program. And that's kind of an ideal situation for government, that the people that are using it are paying the cost for it. So with the increased cost, I would say that it has been an increased cost to the system maintenance. I know that they have one of the towers is being drained this year and whole redone. It's being repainted, cleaned out. People's water is being diverted, it's being repaired, and I understand that that's a process that each of our water towers has to go through, but it's an expensive process. Now, we do have very creative personnel in the county office building, and they look for ways to mitigate those costs. And one of the ways that they did not too long ago is they went out and they realized that there were a lot of leaks in the underground pipes. And instead of pulling up those pipes and replacing them, they found a technology where they can slip a sleeve right inside the pipe and solve the leaking problem. That saved us a lot of money. So it's those kinds of innovative techniques and technologies that we need to look at to keep the costs down. But in an enterprise fund, the costs are what the costs are, and that's unfortunate, but it's a pretty efficient system. Well, and also the state of Maryland, I forgot to mention, the state of Maryland has put a lot of burdens on our sewer systems, and that has driven the costs up for ENR upgrades. So that's one of the things we've had to absorb.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Greenwalt.
Back in the 1930s, we actually gave up our water rights to Baltimore City with the building of the Liberty Dam and the Liberty Reservoir that followed, and now we pay more for raw water than other counties do for filtered water. We've negotiated a terrible deal. The other thing is the Holy Grail, and that's in the 1970s. Plans existed to build Piney Run Lake, and it's hands off, it seems like, but it was originally built to be a reservoir, and I think we need to look back at it and see if it would be significant. We've got everything in place for the go-ahead, but we need to look at whether that is feasible. It was built for a reservoir, it was built for that purpose, and I think it's time to review it to keep the water costs down. Also, we just need to negotiate stronger and better. Thanks.
Okay. Mr. Robert.
Yes, I was actually going to jump in there. I'd written off Baltimore City. I think that was the biggest thing. You get stuck with some of these bad deals. I think and how do you get out of it? So I think that's the situation. Go back and look at our situation and the deal that we made with Baltimore City back in the day to see if there's some way we can improve on that deal. Same thing with the sewage system. I know we looked at one time about Piney Run as an alternative water source for the area, but I think the biggest thing is to look at the old agreement and see what we can work on that. Thank you.
Okay. Mr. Rothstein.
I answered.
Oh, that's good. Apologies. All right. Next question, we'll start with Ms. Fuller. And that question is, do you believe that the bus routes currently offered by Carroll Transit Services are a sufficient means of transportation in the county?
Well, transportation via mass transit is always a kind of a difficult subject. Carroll Area Transit, I know, was revamped just a few years ago, trying to make it more efficient because it was a disaster. And I think that unfortunately there is some segment of the population that doesn't have cars, and we are a widespread community, but I think we have new alternatives coming in. I mean, there's Uber and Lyft and lots of ride sharing. So I would hope that the transit system that we have, we should always be looking at it to see if it's as efficient as it can be, because it is subsidized by us. But I don't think that making it any bigger is going to make it any better. And I definitely don't want to see any buses running in and out of the county. So that's.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Greenwalt.
I can't say that I'm all that familiar with the bus routes of Carroll Transit, but I can say that before he became commissioner under Doug Howard, we were losing money with the Carroll Transit system, and under, I believe, his new wife, who's in charge of it now, we've been losing money under it. So I'd say it's a failed system, and we really, if we continue it, we need to look at making it at least break even, if not profitable. So that would be my answer to it.
Mr. Robert.
Yes, the CAT system, I'm not for something that we hook up to Owings Mills or anything like that. I think the situation is we need to keep it internal within the county. I know we've been very fortunate with the situation with the veterans and be able to pick the vets up to take up to medical visits. So I'm all for that. I think there needs to be a oversight looking at the CAT system and see if there's some improvements that we can do. Thank you.
Okay, Mr. Rothstein.
So focusing on the internal transportation, first with the veterans and the system that's running. Again, I'm very proud again to be part of the advisory council and the programs that are moving our veterans to all of the veterans hospitals and clinics within Maryland and also over into Martinsburg. So we're doing a good job taking care of our veterans. We could do a heck of a lot better. And the way we could do better is by continuing to work with our veterans and ask them what is the best method for you, what's the best times, what's the best system for you. So I feel like we got a good program going with that shuttle service, and it's getting better. And the reason it's getting better is because we're reaching out to the community that it serves. So now look at the CAT system. It's a good program internal to our county, and again, I think it can get better by those that it is serving and saying, oh, are these the right times? Are these the right locations? Take care of ourselves with both the CATs, and the model that I'm using or referencing is what I've seen proven success with the Veterans Program. So thank you.
Okay. All right, this next question, we'll start with Mr. Greenwalt. With the recent passage of enabling legislation in the Maryland General Assembly that gives the county government authority over fire and emergency services, what do you see as the best path forward for emergency services in Carroll County?
Basically, our county depends on volunteers for the fire and emergency services, and it's been a system that's worked since these fire companies came into existence at around the turn of the 20th century. There's a lot of volunteers that wouldn't want it any other way. I don't think we need a paid system, although we have moved into some paid personnel with the emergency responses. But I think the county needs to keep supporting in any which way we can these volunteer fire departments and the brave men and women that serve there. The big change, I guess, now is we don't call them firemen any longer. They insist on being firefighters because of the women that have joined it too. So anyway, I applaud them. We're highly indebted to their services, and I would keep supporting the volunteer system that we have intact. And I don't think a lot of these volunteers would want it any other way. Right. I hope, anyway. Thanks.
Thank you. Mr. Robert.
I think a good analogy is what happened in Sykesville. We have a Sykesville Police Department and we have auxiliary police, and they coexist and work extremely well together. Unfortunately, with the situation of dual income families, I think our volunteer system sometimes it's close to breaking. And you look at the numbers and the number of calls they're getting, it's overwhelming. I love the volunteer system, and I just think we need to have a plan to roll out so that you have a dual system of both paid and volunteers. I want to be very careful about doing it, but I just think that, we all go to the fairs, that we love the firemen, go to the firefighters, that we go to the fairs and support them, and the carnivals, and we love it. It's part of who we are, and it's one of the great things about Carroll County. But I'm looking down the road. I think the plan we need to put in place is going to be some sort of dual situation where you have the people that can volunteer, and then you also have the paid firefighters also too. So I think it's how do we roll that out, do it in a responsible way. That's the key thing. Set up the plan and do it the right way. I have some good friends that will work down in Prince George's County and then volunteer up here in Carroll. So there's a lot of people that have good knowledge in how we can put this plan together. I think that's a great idea to do in the future. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Rothstein.
First off, giving credit where credit is due and applauding our delegation for working with the legislation and getting, the Carroll County firefighters underneath our control is a great first step. I think supporting the CC visa and the individual fire companies is the next piece of this. And we got to focus this on, there are 14 fire companies in Carroll County. They are not all the same. Sykesville has the second most calls in our county. They should be treated differently because their priorities are going to be differently. So how do we resource each one of them has to be taken under consideration. So I can't look at this from a countywide, this is what the answer is for all fire companies and EMS in our county. I think it's our responsibility as leaders to work with those leaders that are, in the fire companies and fire departments and find out what their priorities are, how to resource them best. Again, time, people, and money is what it's all about, and come up with the best solutions. Crafting a hybrid volunteer paid model is a potential strong solution. Again, it may not be the right solution for each one of those fire departments, but it may be for Sykesville, for a couple others, and having that dialogue and keeping that open dialogue is really important. So thank you.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Fuller.
Well, our volunteer services, our firefighters and our emergency services, they're very important to the community. They're important because they are where we come together as a community, for one thing. As volunteers, they do a lot of fundraising, and we are communities that come together and support that through the bingos and the crab and the bull roasts and the carnivals, and a paid volunteer or a paid system would endanger that. So I would like to put more effort into recruiting volunteers. There are efforts that could be made more in the high school. There are volunteer fire department cadets. My kids were in high school. We never heard about that. My husband was a volunteer firefighter when he was growing up. I'm sure that's probably something that we would have participated in, but we never heard about it. So we need to be active, pulling those volunteers out, advertising continuously. In fact, there was a study done, a nationwide study done by a consulting firm, because this is generally, we're hurting for volunteers in all areas, but firefighters in particular across the country. And so they did a study to see, what's going on, and they found out that there's all sorts of things that firefighters can be doing to bring in volunteers, from advertising, leadership training, evaluating potential benefits that we're not offering. If you give tax breaks to companies who allow, local companies who allow their folks to go off and see to these emergencies, or to tax breaks to the volunteer fire department personnel themselves. How about college assistance to those kids that are in high school or in college that would like to be volunteers? I think that we would like to bolster the volunteers here, and I think, think it outside of the box before we start getting rid of the system.
Okay. Thank you. Mr. Greenwalt, or you answer? Sorry about that. You guys are getting me all screwed up now. All right. Next question, we'll start with Mr. Robert for this one. What do you believe the county government's role should be in combating the opioid epidemic, and what else can be done?
Great question. I think it's a big issue. It's a big issue, and historically it was something more in the inner city. Now it's hitting everywhere. When you look at the crisis that we're going through right now, it's been building and it's totally exploding. I love what Brian DiLeonardo, Tammy Loafing, Tim Weber, the sheriff are doing. I think they've done a great job as far as blunting the huge increase in spike in deaths and the overdoses that it's occurring. We're on track this year to be over 120 deaths in our county due to overdoses. So it's a big issue that's hitting everyone, rich, poor, and everywhere in between. So there's some great things that we can do. I applaud what they've been doing right now. I've been to at least 4 of the different programs they've been doing, and at high schools, the colleges, and even the libraries. They're teaching at the high school level. I think we need to get a little lower. I think hitting those at the middle school, more education. They are being very aggressive with the dealers, but I think education is the key, and then also providing more resources for those people that have become victims, and try to get them back on track. So I think it's a multi-pronged approach that we need to have. It's a flare-up right now that we're attacking, but we need to do more. I have some, with my background of 22 years of doing this and working with every single primary care person in the county, all the family practitioners, I know they've not been consulted on this issue. I know they got some great ideas. Dr. Middleton this morning in the paper was one of the heroes. He's got some great ideas. So I think there's some more brain power we can bring in to attack the issue in Carroll County, and I look forward to doing that.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Rothstein.
It is an extremely important issue. It's an evil that's out there. As I shared in my opening statement, service and experience is part of what I believe is a good role to entering into this race. The service that I had on the installation at Fort Meade, I had 55,000 folks that either lived or worked on Fort Meade. We had drug issues, we had suicides, we had a lot of problems. And you cannot just put one piece of a solution to such a multifaceted problem that's out there. So it's not just about the money to solve this type of problem. It really takes an entire community. It takes the schools, it takes our police, it takes our fire, it takes you, it takes the community, it takes the neighborhood to stand up and say something, because there's indicators that are out there all the time, and we have to recognize them and be willing to step up and do something about it. Our government role in that is lead by example. Transparency, communicate, the willingness to serve, to participate in activities, but to work together in solving this really evil problem. I understand that there's resources and money that is being pushed into the county government, and I applaud that that's happening, but that's just one piece of a solution for a very multifaceted evil that we have. So, thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Fuller.
The opioid issue, I think, is quite different from the drug issues that we've experienced in the past. And one of the reasons is that, having talked with law enforcement, is that it's something that happens often through pain medications. It's the prescription drugs that people are taking, and when those prescription drugs are no longer available, they're hooked already, and they go on to heroin, and then there's really big problems. Unfortunately, that's an area that the commissioners really don't have any control over, but we can support the police department in those areas where they are trying to attack the dealers that are selling these things, and then the schools. I'm surprised that the school system, I saw that in 2013, the school system chose not to fund the DARE program in the school system anymore. I would hope that they would bring that back. Right in Sykesville is where the training for that is going on for the police departments. So that should be an easy thing for us to bring back into the schools. But also, I would think that we would start to teach our kids not just about drugs, but the link here is pain medication. So how about we start to teach our kids how to manage pain, mental and physical? You know, there are alternatives, and the earlier we start with, we don't need drugs to do that, here are other things to do that, it's a healthier society overall, and the school system could be doing that, and we could be doing that.
Thank you. Mr. Greenwalt.
As in my opening remarks, we do have a terrible problem here, and it's not just, I believe we should make a mandatory system, at least a symposium or whatever you want to call it, for our students countywide, and make them aware of the situation, that the harm of these opioid drugs. But remember, these opioids are prescribed by the medical institution, and therefore we also need to educate the doctors that are prescribing and sometimes over-prescribing these drugs. Some of these drugs shouldn't even be on the market. This is a problem both for educating our young people and the medical profession. I remember many years ago talking to a guy who was carpenter apprentice, and he left the Baltimore City Police Department as a young policeman there. He was investigating how these kids were getting drugs, and after about a 6-month investigation, they nailed the pusher of them, and it was a guy who was working an ice cream truck and handing out, instead of just ice cream, he's handing out these drugs to the young kids, 12, 13, 14 years old. They had him. He went into court and presented their case, ironclad case, and the judge gave him probation. He said while he was walking out of the courtroom, he was taking off his badge. But the thing that we need to remember is this is not just a young people's problem. It's grown far worse than that. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. All right, I think we're going to do one last question through, and then we'll go to our closing statements. So this last question, we'll start with Mr. Rothstein. Name one law that you would suggest or support to benefit District 5 residents, and explain how you'd work with Carroll County's state delegation to achieve this.
I think I would focus on, and I'm not sure a law, but it's more on funding. And I would focus on bringing more attention to Carroll County's growth opportunities. There are a lot of funding that's out there that's going to different jurisdictions for growth and economic development and growth opportunities. Cybersecurity is key to that. I think working with the legislation on those opportunities and the administration on bringing more funding for this type of business and corporate growth in our community is what we should strive to do. I think, I think that's the focus. So it's not that there's laws, but I do know that the administration has pushed a lot of funding recently, and we have not been recipients of that. And I think we need to voice our opportunities a little bit stronger and getting those type of fundings into our community. So thank you.
Okay, Ms. Fuller.
Well, I would start with repeal. I would have repeal bills, and there's all sorts of them, but the first one that comes to mind is one that was just put into law, is the red flag gun bill. I think that people are very upset about that, and I would say if the delegation could pass something that would benefit this county, I think that there are a lot of people in this county that would like to see that repealed.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Greenwalt. Mr. Greenwalt.
I don't think I'd be looking at a law, but to approach a delegation. The thing that we need, as I said earlier, we do need to step up our investigation to opioids to really combat that, to also, like I said, go to looking at improving our traffic situation, let's get behind the Warfield project. Taxes, we can keep low, but when we talk about keeping taxes low, we did keep them low under Governor Ehrlich, but fees went up, and licensing fees and stuff, and these, it seems like we grab it one way or another from our citizens. I would like, if I guess, one law, I'm very much against these traffic cameras. That's another money grab. Certainly, it raises literally millions for the state and what have you. So rather, with these traffic cameras, they don't understand that the mother has to get her children to day school, or there's a medical emergency or whatever. I put my faith into the police department and controlling traffic that way. These traffic signals that are supposed to operate only in the daytime, and they do it at night. It's basically one way to keep taxes low and keep the fees coming. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Robert.
Good question. And I think the biggest thing for me right now, we want our government to be more responsive to the people. So how do we do that? And one of the big things is referendums. Looking at trying to get a referendum through the county, you got to get a majority on the current county commissioners to pass it before you can get a referendum put in place. So that would be the number one thing that I would try to do. The current rules are lacking. If you know my last name, it's Robert, the Robert's Rules of Order. You may have heard about that. It's most businesses and government organizations follow Robert's Rules of Order. So there definitely needs to be more that way. But I think making referendums easier for people that have issues to bring it up so that the government will be more responsive to the people, it just makes sense. And I know California gets crazy and they have 120 different referendums and everybody doesn't know what's going on there. But I think in a reasonable way we could provide that here in the county, so when people have issues, it makes their government responsive. And as opposed to having to wait in 3 or 4 years to elect new county commissioners. So that's where I would go with this. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. And with that, we'll give each of the candidates 2 minutes to give a closing statement. And again, we'll start at the end of the table with Ms. Fuller.
Thank you. Well, I appreciate and thank you for being here this evening. And thank you to the Carroll County Times and the Community Media Center and all the folks that help organize that. And thank you. I have seen you many times, and you're really doing an important role. So thank you for the timekeeping. There's a few things that I want to reiterate. First, we need to rein in government, both its spending and its intrusion into our lives. It taxes us, regulates us, and rezones us. But as citizens, we're supposed to be the ones that are in charge. And I don't see that mindset happening unless we change leadership. We have to restore common sense ethics to county government by addressing the shortfalls in the ethics ordinance, and any ethics ordinance that allows commissioners to fund salary increases for their own family members, that corruption just needs to be changed. We need to encourage the growth of existing business in the county. And how can we expect to have new businesses come in if existing businesses know that they can't grow here? I've been outspoken in support of good government for years, and openly critical of the Freedom Plan. But I haven't seen the rest of these guys out there talking on these issues. If they haven't been standing out there and standing up for you, are they going to do that once they get into office? Elected officials are supposed to be the citizen's advocate in the face of the bureaucracy. I have been, and I will continue to do that. In closing, there's 3 promises that I will make if I'm elected. One is to be a real Republican, one who's not going to back down in protecting your rights and your pocketbook. 2, to rein in spending and prevent tax increases. And 3, to fight against government attempts to socially re-engineer and urbanize Eldersburg and the surrounding areas. We are here because we love it, and we can't risk losing that. If these things are important to you, I appreciate your vote.
Thank you. All right, Mr. Greenwalt.
Okay, I'd also like to thank everyone that came out this evening, gave up on the Orioles for tonight. My other opponents, thank you, Kathy, Ed, Frank, the Carroll County Times, and the Media Center. Thank you for putting this on. This is where the, I guess, rubber meets the road, and it's good to have this forum. I moved it, like I said, into Carroll County in 1969, and nearly a half century ago. And of course, that still makes me a newcomer in the county. But also, 12 years ago, I ran for the first time for this position when it was still a county-wide election, and people encouraged me to run again. But this time, don't stop at the Mason-Dixon line; just keep on running. But we have some very serious issues to address. I'm not giving up on this generation of young people. The tragedies of the opioid and the heroin addiction, you can't just judge it and say it's somebody else's problem. Pretty much all of us in this room tonight know someone that went through that tragedy of seeing their son or daughter on the bathroom floor overdosed or wherever in the house. It's just so unspeakable tragedy. The traffic situation, as I've mentioned many times throughout this debate, we've got to address it, and it's going to get worse, and we need to do it now. Also, the development is waiting there for the Warfield project. We've been talking about it for a quarter of a century. It's time to move on it. And we need to expand the recreational facilities here in the Eldersburg-Sykesville area. Again, I thank you all for a lovely evening.
Thank you. Mr. Robert.
Great. So we have a true grassroots campaign. We're not funded by big developers or corporations. We've not hired a marketing firm. We put together an outstanding group of talented and dedicated volunteers that want what's best for Carroll County. I'm pro-business, pro-first responders, pro-schools, pro-turf fields, and pro-technology. I want to thank you to my family, my wife, Beth, Lindsay, and Jill. Ronald Reagan had his kitchen cabinet. I have our dining room team. Chris Finney, John Bryant, Katie Garrity, Chip Bleem, Fred Gossage, Brian Murray, Al Grasley, Patty Finney, Karen Bryant, Amy Murray, Linda Grasley, Karen Leatherwood, Stacy Wakefield, Beth Knorr, and Jay Fennerman. I got many other strong supporters. I won't go through the list, but it starts with an A and ends with a Vince and an Ian and all sorts. I'm humbled by your efforts to volunteer to support me. I thank you to almost the entire Sykesville Town Council team for supporting me. You're some of the hardest working politicians I know. You're truly one of the reasons that Sykesville is the coolest small town in America. I thank you to the teachers and the students and administrators for supporting me. The endorsement is not taken lightly. The veterans, the first responders, my local Sykesville police force, and those sheriff deputies that I've met so far, I thank you for your service. I hope to work with you to make Carroll a better place. I thank you. I look forward to representing all Carroll Countyans. I hope that you would join me in this great adventure. I hope that you will volunteer your time and resources to help. I hope to meet you either this Saturday at the American Legion or some other place. We did it for Sykesville. We can make it. We can do the same thing for Carroll County. Let's make Carroll County the best place to raise a family. That means spectacular schools, low crime, reasonable growth, and a pro-business attitude. Let's dream big and enjoy the journey. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Rothstein.
Okay, so this is pretty cool because I only thought I had a minute for closing remarks, so I actually have a minute just to talk right now. And thank goodness there's no teleprompter, I'll put it that way. One thing is that often the elephant in the room that we don't want to talk about is fear. And I think the fear that we have so often is the fear of change. I want to take that fear of change away, and I want to embrace the opportunities that lie ahead. And that's what I want to focus on. Let's not worry about the changes that are happening, but let's embrace the opportunities that lie ahead for our future. So with that, once again, I want to thank you and the Media Center and the Times. As shared earlier, this election for me is about service and experience, confidence and character, focusing on the issues that matter to you, and I believe I am the right candidate representing you as your county commissioner. For some, service is a slogan. For me and my family, has become embedded in our life and our culture, tested in conflict, proven in successes, has become a permanent part of our lives. In closing, I once again humbly ask for your consideration, support, and vote to elect me to represent you and lead our community to continued success. You know, life is really good. Yours in service, very respectfully, Ed Rothstein. Thank you.
Thank you.
Wow, that was very thought-provoking. Everybody remained alert and upbeat. But first of all, I want to thank our panelists and candidates for coming and participating and opening themselves to you all as citizens of this community. I also want to thank our moderator, Mr. Wayne Carter with the Carroll County Times. Terrific job. Terrific job. Thank you. Thank you so much. I also want to thank the South Carroll Senior Center for allowing us to utilize this space. This shows what a community effort could do to put together. Space is terrific. Finally, I want to thank the staff. These guys are always there serving you, as with the rest of the members of the Community Media Center. But before we leave, I just want to encourage you guys to learn more about the candidates. Hopefully they'll hang around a little while after this event for you to communicate and dialogue a little bit more with them. But above all, remember to go out and vote on June the 26th. Thank you for being a good audience. I forgot one thing. A part of being a good audience is those thought-provoking questions that you asked and you presented. The only dumb question is a question that doesn't get asked. So don't hesitate to ask these individuals and to resolve any issues that you have. Thank you and good night.